Hey everyone, it's Nate. Happy Record Store Day week, everyone. Although, if you go to AudiofileUSA.com, you'll discover that every day is Record Store Day. AudiofileUSA.com only sells excellent and near-mint vinyl records, some still sealed. And again, I have no idea how they find sealed records, but they do, and they ship worldwide. That's AudiofileUSA.com. Go there now and find your holy grail. And of course, record nerds, you need a Groove Washer record cleaner, and I recommend the new Mondo Groove Washer bundle. It's got everything you need for your records to sound their very best. Ask for the Groove Washer by name at your local record shop, or go to groovewasher.com, and here's a 10% off discount code VinylGuide10. That goes for everything at groovewasher.com, including the new Mondo Groove Washer bundle. That's groovewasher.com, promo code VinylGuide10. Now let's get into this week's episode of the Vinyl Guide.
Do you listen to and collect vinyl records? Well, you're in luck. Welcome to the Vinyl Guide, the podcast made for record nerds like yourself. Here's your host, the biggest record nerd of them all, Nate Goyer.
Well, greetings, record nerds and all the ships at sea. This is Nate, host of the Vinyl Guide. I hope you're all well. Happy Record Store Drops Week, everyone. August 29th was a big day for us record nerds. I'm guessing a fair amount of you were able to mask up and get out to a record shop for some of the new Record Store Day releases. Wow, there were some great ones this year, including The Wipers, Is This Real? A clear pressing with a bonus 7-inch and an autographed poster. That was awesome. The Wild Chapulillas, or Chapulillas, the Wild Chapul... I don't know how to pronounce it. I've got the record, but I can't read it, obviously. The Wild Chapulillas, it's New Orleans funk with members of the Meters, and it is incredible. The Langniapi Sessions, I got these records, I just can't pronounce the title of them. I'm pretty sure I got the Wipers right, but the Langniapi Sessions LP, the Nat Turner Rebellion, the Red Vinyl LP, that's amazing. Lots of great music this Record Store Day drops, and most of it is already sold out. I can already see the flippers on eBay and Discogs asking 3 times the price or more. So the good news is that these Record Store Day releases have largely sold out, which is fantastic for the record shops and the small labels. They need this business, and I'm glad it was a good weekend for them. The tough news is that a lot of these titles may be difficult to get over the coming weeks. But what generally happens is over the next few weeks, the prices will stay high, and then they'll start to drop once the flippers realize that no one's going to pay $100 for a reissue of a David Bowie record. So don't pay the exorbitant prices from the flippers on eBay or Discogs. Hang on to your money. You'll be able to find a reasonably priced copy fairly soon. So let's get into this week's episode, which I think you'll all enjoy. I'm already smiling. I've heard it. I know how it turns out. This week, we have on the show Mr. Guy Pratt, the reputable, little bit infamous, somewhat eccentric, highly talented bass player. For those of you who are unfamiliar with Guy, he's probably most known for being the go-to bass player for Pink Floyd since 1987. And not only Pink Floyd stuff, but he also does all the related projects as well. The David Gilmour solo records and tours. In fact, he's currently due to be out now with Nick Mason's Saucerful of Secrets tour. But of course, that's been paused like most things in the COVID era. Guy's also been in the room for many interesting conversations, recording sessions, occurrences like the Dave Gilmour appearance on the Roger Waters' The Wall O2 performance, which he'll talk about today. Guy has seen a lot of stuff, and beyond Pink Floyd, he's also had an amazing career with artists like Madonna, Michael Jackson, Jimmy Page, Robert Palmer. All these adventures and more are covered in his book, My Bass and Other Animals, which you can get at guypratt.com. And good news, not only is there a Kindle version of his book, which you can get immediately, but there's also an audio version of this book, read by Guy, which I imagine is quite delightful. So in today's interview, we discuss Guy's time with Pink Floyd, Getting the gig, the first tour, the nerves, the challenges. We hear some behind-the-scenes perspectives on what it's like to be part of the world's most beloved band. The touring, the recordings, the reunions, and more. Guy's like an astronaut in that he's had this amazing experience that maybe a dozen people in history have had, so we spend a fair amount of time talking about his Pink Floyd experiences. Also, we spend some time on the Toy Matinee project. Recently, we had an episode of the show, number 233, where we talked about the recording archive of the late Kevin Gilmour. And we discussed this band, Toy Matinee, which, for many listeners who may not be familiar with, Toy Matinee was this amazing project from the early 90s, had an incredible budget, used some of the industry's best musicians, including Guy, and was led by producer Patrick Leonard and the songwriter, the late, great Kevin Gilmour. Now, if you haven't heard Toy Matinee, give them a listen. Their one album is on streaming services, and it's stunningly brilliant. Good luck finding a vinyl copy, though, which we talk about in episode 233 with Wayne Perez, who's the guardian and archivist of the Kevin Gilmour tapes. But today, we talk to Guy and get his perspective on the experiences with Toy Matinee and the third Matinee projects, and we cover quite a bit more. So, music nerds, get a refill of your coffee now because you're really going to enjoy this one. And finally, just so you know, there is an extended version of today's interview available only to our Patreon subscribers at patreon.com/vinylguide. Go there now, help sponsor the show, and you can hear even more talk with Guy as he covers more of today's topics in detail, discusses the origin of the Fisherman's Pink Floyd band, his involvement in the Michael Hutchence project with the late Andy Gill, some of the records he wished he played on but passed on the opportunity only to regret it later, and quite a bit more. That extended version of today's interview is only available to our Patreon supporters at patreon.com/vinylguide. Go there now, help support this show, and get access to extended interviews, secret episodes, and more. And finally, if you like today's interview, there's over 200 more of these episodes available anytime on any podcast app. Tons of artists have come on the show and talked about vinyl records and music history, including folks like Mike Watt, Josh Freese, Bad Religion's Jay Bentley was just on the show, Buzz Osborne of Melvins, Jazz Coleman of Killing Joke, that one's quite entertaining, the late great Andy Gill was on the show, the amazing bass genius Ron Carter, Michael Girard of Swans, Trey Spruance of Mr. Bungle, Scott Gorham of Thin Lizzy, Robert Trujillo of Metallica, and heaps more. Go to The Vinyl Guide on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, Sonnet, wherever you get your podcasts. Scroll through the list and enjoy, folks. And with that, let's get into today's interview with Mr. Guy Pratt. Well, there he is.
Oh, hello.
How are you, Guy?
I'm good. How are you? No,
I'm doing very good.
Where are you?
I'm in Sydney.
Oh, well.
Yeah. So it's evening here, and this is a land that you're quite familiar with, I understand.
Very familiar with, yes.
Mhm.
Yes. Yeah, which I pine for, I must say.
Yeah. Your first major band, Ice House, was down here. You made your bones here, right?
I made my bones here, and it's probably fair to say I'm probably the only English musician who, by the age of 21, had played every RSL and leagues club there is.
So I'd be interested to cut right to the I want to talk to you
Okay.
about records. I want to talk to you about Speedballs, No Survivors.
I'm not on that. I'm not on that. That was actually recorded before my time.
You weren't on the okay, because you're credited on it. You're credited. For
I
that record.
know.
Okay.
Well,
Okay.
I mean, for what it's worth.
Well, actually, it's worth about $400. So that's
Is it?
it is. Yeah. If you find a copy of that, sign it anyway. Don't turn it away.
I am on the live album though. There's Maximum Speed, the Speedball
CD?
live album.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So you a name only on that one. I want to talk about Children of Seven. I want to talk about a few others of these. First, are you a vinyl collector? Do you have a record collection?
Not really. No, I lost a lot of my records years ago. A load of stuff went into storage, and then I think I just couldn't remember which storage it was in. And no, if if I'm honest, I was really happy when CDs came along.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
I loved CDs because I'm quite clumsy and I always scratched records.
Oh, okay.
But now I do. The funny thing is, I'm actually now buying records again. I now have I didn't have a turntable for a few years even. I had the obligatory Technics in my studio. It was quite funny. That was everyone had to have a Technics. But I don't scratch. I'm not a DJ. Why do I have to have a Technics? You just did. It was the law.
Right. Yep. That's the de facto. Okay, so you got one of those. You're starting to build up your record collection. Is there any sort of purpose for getting records, or just kind of revisiting a hobby?
Revisiting a hobby. I'll tell you one thing. The thing I've been listening to since I haven't got Technics now. I've got a nice new Val Turns or something turntable. And the thing that I listen to, because it's been very sunny here, what I've actually been digging out and listening to more than anything, which is something I've never, ever really valued, which is something that my mum got me at my suggestion, but my mum got me for my 25th birthday, which was the Capitol Years complete box set of Frank Sinatra, all the Capitol albums, all in the original sleeves. And it's just sunshine in a bottle. It's just so gorgeous. You just put on any of them and it's just gorgeous, It's just the sound of those recordings. And I still find it very interesting. With recordings, how actual recording hasn't really got better.
No.
And for instance, if you're if Taylor Swift or Beyonce goes into a studio now, she'll be using the same mic that Frank was using.
You're right. If she's lucky. One of those Telefunkens.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. In fact, I would say records themselves probably peaked around the 60s with Blue Notes, and they got the compounds right for the records, and they really made not only just gorgeous recordings, but also the focus on quality for the finished product, the vinyl record, was probably at its peak there. Once it hit the 70s, it became, a mass market commodity, and it was more about making millions of them than making several thousand of good quality.
Well, that's why Pink Floyd always insisted that they had the Deutsche Grammophon pressings for their albums because EMI could do that, and they were like twice the weight of a standard record.
Okay, all right. So they actually went out of their way to be able to say, "I want it pressed here. I want." Oh, okay. I believe there's actually a pressing factory in Europe where the pressing machines are dedicated solely to Pink Floyd records.
There was the first CD plant in Britain, which was in Wales somewhere. Apparently, I remember David was taken to visit it by EMI sometime in the late 80s, early 90s. And the first thing they pressed was Dark Side of the Moon, just because that was the obvious thing to try out for first CDs. And when David went there years later, it had never done anything else.
Yeah, well, a lot of those have sold. Yeah, I can see where that would happen. So there seems to have been a focus around the Floyd camp about physical media music. That was important to everyone involved, yeah?
Well, because, a lot of that was to do with hypnosis and to do with Storm, that it was, there was so much, there was, the artwork and the visual aspect of it was, and also because I guess it's because the records were very much pieces in their own right. I mean, that's the thing I miss with that physical, is that the thing for me with records when I was a kid is that, you'd get on the bus with your record, like your Who album or your Clash album or whatever, and you would just sort of read the fine print over and over and over again. And every single word was significant, It's like, was it mastered by Doug Sachs at the mastering lab? Because fucking most of them were. That was nothing. It was the Lord. It's like Doug Sachs was the only guy in town. Was the only game in town.
Yeah. You just pour over every single detail. You got to learn
every detail. But that's the thing now. It's like, because like my son, who is massive into music, but contemporary music, and he's he's got a band and they're fantastic. But there's not when I ask him who's produced something or who was the engineer or who, and it's people don't really know unless the producer is the writer and everything. People don't. There's not a culture of that anymore.
Right.
There's also because there just aren't the people, because most things are recorded in someone's house, and it's you've got someone's fixing the hard drives and making the tea, and that's it. It's not, I remember things like on Peter Gabriel's third album, for instance, you had this ridiculous chat where you had Steve Lillywhite producing, Hugh Padgham engineering, and then, I've forgotten his name, someone who went on to be a great producer as Tape-Op. It's like everyone, there was this amazing, but when I had my studio at the Townhouse years ago, we used to joke about the Townhouse career path. Because you'd be on a session in one of the big studios one day, and there'd be some snotty little Tape-Op who you slap around the head and send him down the cash point and off to buy a weed or whatever. and then you pop your head in the door 2 weeks later, and he's producing Scritti Politti.
So 1986, you get the gig for playing with Pink Floyd. It's 86, right?
87.
87. Okay. 87. All right. And that was, arguably probably the most desirable position in any music band, certainly of the decade, if not, maybe even the century.
Well, funnily enough, not necessarily. Yeah. It wasn't for a Londoner of my generation. It's very hard to explain how, because any of us who came after punk, people forget just how tribal it was. Pink Floyd were, amongst my generation, were literally the uncoolest thing in the world. You loved them, but you couldn't really talk about it. You'd love Syd Barrett. Syd Barrett was fine, but anything from Dark Side of the Moon onwards was like, absolutely, it just wasn't talked about. It was for everyone, everyone loved it. But the funny thing is, people who are five years younger than me, like Noel Gallagher, can get up and go, I could sing you every song from the Wall in the right order. But no, it was really interesting amongst my peers. It was not a cool gig to have. I wasn't necessarily the only person offered it, and I think there might be people who turned it down. I knew it was going to be. For me, it absolutely was the greatest thing in the world. But no, it wasn't a slam dunk. It wasn't like, say, being asked to play for the Stones. What was very interesting was because I went off and did that Pink Floyd tour, and whilst I was away, the whole acid house thing happened in England, which was massive. And that generation of people who got into ecstasy, they discovered Pink Floyd. And then it became, so what was really weird, I always remember when we played at Main Road Stadium, the Manchester City ground in Manchester, and you had all our usual kind of 30s something audience. And then all these kids came running down the front, and it was all the casuals who were like the football hooligans who all wear this Pringle knitwear and the cool, and they were all like mad for it, man, fucking mad for it. And there was this handing over of the baton to a new generation where it was like, I thought, oh my God, suddenly in Britain, it's cool to be in Pink Floyd again.
But it must have been, getting the gig. Did you feel you deserved it? Did you always have, right now you have a high level of confidence. You've had a lifetime of fantastic work and stories and everything. But at that point, still relatively early in your career, did you always have that level of confidence?
No, I was absolutely convinced. When we got flown out to Toronto, I was saying to someone the other day, I had two absolutely competing emotions, which was that, I was absolutely getting sent home. There was no question. I was going to get sent home within about a week of rehearsals. It's like, and I actually remember we landed at Toronto Airport, and it was the first time we all kind of met properly. I remember being in a limo with Gary Wallace and Tim Rennick and people, and we were driving to our hotel, and we went past the CNE Stadium, and I remember someone went, "Wow, we're playing there in 2 months' time or something." I remember just thinking, "I'm not." I'm not. There's no. I don't know. I'm not playing there. There's no way that is happening. I am going to get found out. It's like, you can't play for Pink Floyd. They're ridiculous. It's like, Robert Palmer, you got away with it. Brian Ferry, you got away with it. You're not getting away with this. But at the same time, when I got to know the principal guys, David and Rick and Nick, I felt so at home with them. It was just like, oh my God, these are my people. This is certainly on a personal level. And it was like, this is where I want to live, not the fame or the glamour or anything, but just as people. They were, it was like, this is my music. These are my people. It really felt like that. And it was like, God, this feels like home, but you're getting sent home. So,
it's nice for now.
Absolutely. Yeah. Enjoy this week because you're going home.
So were the rehearsals difficult? Were they tough?
Chaos. They were absolute chaos because obviously they were used to having the sort of everyone being under the iron thumb of Roger, and David wasn't even there for the first week or two, and Nick seemed more interested in the production side of things, and and I don't think his confidence wasn't great. Rick had been very much out of the loop for a while, and David he didn't really want to be in charge. I mean, so Bob Ezrin has to be brought in to crack the whip, which was great, which I loved, because as soon as Bob was there, it felt like you were in a musical or something, and that appealed to my sort of show busy side.
Right.
So,
okay.
And so that's what it was. Bob came in and directed it like a musical. It was like being, Cats.
Okay, so it's more about blocking.
Actually, Sweeney Todd would probably be a better example.
And a 5, 6, 7, 8.
Exactly. 2, 3, kick turn.
At that point, there was during that tour. I mean, it's highly choreographed, right? I mean, there's probably 15 songs that you had to learn. There wasn't any danger of you guys just all of a sudden surprising the crowd with Arnold Lane. It was pretty well scripted from beginning to end, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, we had to abandon Echoes very early on.
Yeah. Oh, that's right. Yeah. That was an opener, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was, and it was. That's
ambitious.
It was very, very ambitious. And I remember David saying to me, well, because especially with the younger players, we were 80s boys. We were brought up on click tracks and drum machines and strict counts. And so that's the idea of like, okay, you just fade out, there's this wind bit, and then you come back in. And people were going, well, when do you come back in? It's, well, you just come back in. Like, yeah, but how many bars is that? Well, and David was like, I don't know, you just come back in. And I got it. I found that. I completely understood that. And so it was quite... David turned, one of the more memorable things, David turned to me once, he said, oh, God, he said, the trouble with modern musicians is they just don't know how to disintegrate. And I reminded him of that a few years later. And he said, yeah, well, you certainly spent the next 3 years proving me wrong, didn't you?
So it seems like from your book, and again, My Bass and Other Animals, I love it.
Yes.
I'm so sorry it ended in 2007. I'm hoping that there's a volume 2.
I am writing volume 2 now.
Ah, wonderful. Okay.
Because of just that, the funny thing is, one good thing that's come out of lockdown is since I've been doing these shows is it's been very good for my book. A lot of people, and I've had so many people say, well, where's the second one? I go, no. And I said, well, it's really stupid if all these people want one. It seems, seeing as I haven't got any fucking work anymore, and I'm in the absolute last group of people who will go back to work. Literally everyone on earth that goes back to work before we do.
Yeah.
So I figured I should try and write a book. I just really don't enjoy writing. It's the problem.
Yeah. Well, you
I
got
like this. This is what I like doing.
Oh, you're welcome anytime. We could the stories that you have in your book. There's a lot of the way you describe the behavior. You focus a lot on the mistakes, some of the forgotten cues, and maybe some of the behavior. I'm sure that was in the minority.
Well,
of time,
that's the stuff you remember. That's why.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's obviously. I mean, because just listing a load of great shows is kind of boring. Mm-hmm. That's why if you're working on a project, you never, if someone asks if they want to make a documentary of you doing it, you always say no, because they're looking for a disaster.
Yeah, they need an angle.
And
drama.
They'll do everything they can to make it fair.
Were you given a lot of leeway to put your own touch on some of the songs, or did you?
I totally was, and I kind of wish I hadn't, in a way. I mean, I was a dick on those first couple of tours. It was the 80s. I was young. It was, and there was, especially because having like someone like Gary Wallace there, who's such a flash bang, and Scott Page. It was very, very. They were very flashy players, and so you kind of thought, well, I guess that's what he wants, and what David wants. And as you get older and wiser, like the last tour, especially on David's tours, David Gilmour's solo tours, I really pride myself now on my accuracy of sound. I play a precision, I play with a pick. And if I do change stuff, I try to change it in a way that it sounds like it could always have been there, as opposed to putting a stupid slap break into Brick in the Wall.
Right. So in the book, you began talking about a lot of activity, and I'd say behavior that had a lot of, I'll say, hubris to it. Times where you probably, if you weren't so endeared with the band, you may have been moved on.
Oh God, absolutely, absolutely. I mean, and now, and of course, as an older and wiser man, and a sober man, I should point out, you realise that it's it's shocking. Like I said, though, I think I said this, but because I did, as a musician, you are hired as a professional to perform to the best of your abilities at any given time. Whereas I was labouring under the misapprehension that I'd been asked to join a gang. And as long as I got, the show done, I could do whatever I want. And it was all just a laugh, and now looking back, and especially something like a Pink Floyd tour, you think there's fucking hundreds of people employed and millions of, equipment and trucks and all that. And you're just dicking about. It's like, you can't. Well, obviously, in my case, it would appear you can, but you shouldn't. You really shouldn't. But but the thing is, the only thing I will say in my defense is I never blew a gig. I never even blew a whole song. I never even blew a song. And I know that, and David has made that clear to other people, so that's the only, he did actually say to a friend of his at one point, he said, I'd love to get rid of that Pratt. He said, but he said, just gets twatted all the time. He said, but he is the most consistent musician in the band.
The best line in your book does belong to David. I believe when you were dating Richard Wright's daughter.
Oh God, yeah.
And the security guard started seeing Nick's daughter,
yeah.
And then you noticed the security guard was not around anymore.
Yeah. Doesn't take 6 weeks to rehearse a security guard guy.
At the time, did that pierce you like it does today?
Yes, it absolutely did. Yes, it did. It did. But
do you know if they had a plan B?
But the thing is, no, it wasn't really that big a deal. No, the thing is that David knows that I'll take the bait for anything. He's very, very good at winding me up. He always has been, and it's now I just accept that that's my role to play, is to be eternally baited. But
now, would you describe the Pink Floyd gig as cushy?
How would you mean? I mean,
well, I guess there's a big machine. Obviously, there's a lot of pressure for you to be able to perform, but getting from point A to point B and the rehearsal time,
that stuff, that was all very cushy. Yeah, that was definitely all very cushy. Yes, you have your own plane and everything. Although the funny thing is that is because now, of course, the band I'm hoping to return to. Nick Mason's Sauce Full of Secrets, which is we basically travel by bus, and it's if you're realistic, it's actually better than having your own plane, because even if you've got your own plane, and believe me, I'm not complaining about, but you still have to get out of the hotel and get in a van and go to the airport and go, and of course you don't get any of the fun stuff of going to an airport. You don't see it, but you don't get to go shopping because you just go into the general aviation bit, which I don't know if this makes, if you're not familiar with private flying, the one thing is that general aviation in most airports is shitty. There's a crap little coffee machine and maybe some sandwiches, right? So whereas I love airports, I love terminal, I love shopping, I love it. I'm a sucker for the whole thing. So, So the whole reason that general aviation is rubbish is because you're not spending any time there, because you basically turn up and get on your plane. But anyway, but you're still having to go through all the stuff of going to the airport and everything. Whereas if you're on a bus, you walk out of the hotel and you're back in your other home. You have your slippers, you have your cardigan, and you got all your books and stuff that you leave on it, and you're just in another home.
Right.
So you're not traveling, and it's. I mean, it is quite funny that when we started in 2018, that this was actually the first time in his life that Nick Mason had slept on a tour bus.
Oh, really?
Well, they basically went straight from the van to the plane.
Okay. Well, fair. Or I would imagine he would probably be driving himself to some of the shows.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, exactly.
When you were recording with Floyd, were you part of the evolution of the songs, or when you came in, were the songs pretty much done?
Well, one of them I co-wrote, which if you on my lockdown licks, I point out, which was with some of the recording. But the funny thing is, because David usually just plays the bass himself on the records.
Right.
He's played bass on most of the Pink Floyd.
Momentary Lapse is done when you got there, but Division Bell was something that you were there from the
beginning.
beginning.
I was there. Well, it was the first time since Medal, I think, where they actually no, that's not true because they did up to Wish You Were Here, where they would actually just go into a studio and just noodle around and record everything and then just see what they had after a couple of weeks. So the three of them did that. They went into Britannia Row and I came in for the first week or 2 weeks. I can't remember, which was fantastic. Although it was actually Rick was the person who seemed to be keenest to do stuff. So it tended to be me and him noodling around. And that's where I came up with the idea for Wearing the Inside Out. Because if you listen to it, it's completely, it's a bass riff. It's a bass and a bass with harmonic chords. In fact, you've watched my Lockdown Licks and I break the whole thing down for you. And then funny enough, so there was, apart from that, when it came to them actually, they then moved to David's houseboat. And then, we did some sessions, full band in, where was that? At Olympic Studios. But then when they were doing the final record, I remember David, I said, well, what tracks do you want me to come in and play on? And David said, oh, it's all right, I'll do it. And I said, well, no, David, the thing is, obviously you can. But the thing is, if I don't play bass on this record, I look a real dick. And he went, oh yeah, all right then. so let me put. But there's some where I think, what do you want from me? For instance, is my bass line, and I mean it's very, very simple, but I'm very proud of it. It's very good. So
there's a lot of exploration to finally get to the core of what the song is. And so the process of that, is that quite extensive, or did you find yourselves really coming together much more naturally?
It was quite, I mean, the thing is, I was very aware of the time in Britannia Row that I would be playing too much and stuff, just because, and no fault of anyone's, it's just that I think anyone would have trouble playing as little as they, expect or require or are used to. Because actually there's this thing, because Roger was a pretty active player. He's quite all over the place. I mean, that's one of the things I've loved from having to really get to grips with the early stuff for Saucerful is actually what a radical bass player Roger was in the early days. Like really radical. I mean, he was like Peter Hook or something. It's all up the dusty end and kind of mad. And it's interesting that he actually became a far more conventional player as the years went by.
Oh, okay. Maybe it's the difference between playing with someone like Sid and then playing with someone like David, where Sid is a little bit more mad. Roger had to hold it together a little bit more, yeah?
I think it's also to do with the poshness of your environs, right? Which is that, because as Peter Hook has said, the reason he developed that style of playing up top is because New Order, Joy Division, used to rehearse in this shitty little, rehearsal room up in Manchester, and that was the only way he could hear himself. It was by playing up the top, and I get that, which is, and it was probably the same with Floyd. I can imagine Roger would have been playing through some WEM PA amp, and you got like this mad loud, a Farfisa organ and a Telecaster, and I'm sure the only way you could hear yourself was by playing up high.
Do you have a relationship with Roger at all? Have you guys communicated at all?
I've met him several times. I mean, I went to his daughter's wedding. He showed me around the house. I'm fine with Roger.
Okay. That's good. Because I know that
never done anything to me.
I know. Yeah. But you're stepping into an environment where there's a lot of different, and I think there's probably more drama from the onlookers than the people that are within the camps, but just kind of understanding how those two camps dealt, especially back when you were first joining the band, how those two camps got along.
Oh yeah. Well, no, they didn't. I mean, it was just, it was never the twain shall meet, and it was vicious. I mean, it's perfect. I mean, Michael Kamen for years managed to straddle both camps. Michael was working for Floyd and he was working for Roger, and like same with John Caron. Managed to keep that going for As I used to joke with him, I said that at Caron's at this rate, the groove in his ass from sitting on that fence will be visible from space.
I do want to talk to you about Toy Matinee as well. Your involvement with Toy Matinee, was it Patrick Leonard that pulled you into that project?
Yeah, I mean, I was the first person. I was there before Kevin or anyone.
Okay.
It was when Pat had the idea. And he talked to me about. I mean, Pat. I'd met Pat through through Brian Ferry. And again, that's something that's always been a mystery to me. Pat kind of exalts me as a bass player in a way that I find hard to understand. And the reason is because Pat has an understanding of what I do, which is so much better than mine, that when I work with Pat, I am that guy. It's like anything I do with Pat is amazing. It's pretty much all the best work I've ever done has been with Pat Leonard, because he knows what I can do and he knows how to get it out of me. So when he says I'm the best bass player in the world, it's like, well, yeah, I am when I'm with you, because you make me that guy. Although I still would say I'm not. I know, I just find it extraordinary because he's got, Stanley Clarke or whoever he wants at the end of the phone. But anyway, so, and I just done the Madonna record with Pat. Like a Prayer, and he said, listen, I'm putting this project together, are you up for it? And I was like, yeah, fuck yeah, I'd love that. So basically it was in February of '89 the Pat flew me over, and we had to put a band together. So, and he just said, there's this guy Kevin Gilbert who his band Giraffe, he judged him in a talent contest for Yamaha, and he said, this guy, I think he's great, we should try him out. And then we auditioned Brian McLeod, and I remember I just loved the cut of Brian's jib immediately. And in fact, he was meant to go back to San Francisco and that night, and I just said, no, you're not going anywhere. And we went and had a mad night out, and that was it. He was in. Yeah, and then Tim Pierce turned up, who was amazing. Right. And it was an extraordinary thing. I said, the funny thing is, it's kind of over here, no one knows about it at all. In America, amongst musicians, I get more kudos amongst like 90, like I met Dre's crew and Beck's band, people like that. And they're like, fucking guy, Toy Matinee, man, whoa. I get more kudos for that amongst American musicians than anything I've ever done. It's like, my joke is, it's like my Velvet Underground. Only 300 people heard it, but they all started bands.
So bringing Kevin into the project, it was Patrick's project. Was there an audition with Kevin? How did that work? Or was it just a collaboration?
I can't actually remember. I don't know if maybe Pat gave him one of the songs to go and put something on, or I can't remember. But it was always, it was feisty. It was always feisty between Kevin and Pat. And I could see why.
Well, why was that? What was your perspective?
Well, I mean, Kevin was such an incredibly driven and brilliant, talented character. He was, but also he was quite naive in some ways. I mean, he was a very young guy. I mean, it's simple as, this is not to denigrate him in any way. I haven't got a bad word to say about him, but it's, and I guess, and I was
this is his first big gig too, right?
His first big gig, and I was probably a bit cocky too. There was like, it was Pat's amazing studio. Pat was the absolute golden boy. He was, Pat was striding the world at that point, and which is why he went to Warner Brothers and said, I want to do a project, and of course he's just given them True Blue followed by Like a Prayer, and they're just like, mate, whatever you want. You know what I mean? It's like, here, just write your own check. So, and obviously I just, I'd come out of Pink Floyd and I'd just done the Madonna album. So, and I was only 27. So I was probably a bit stuck up as well. And that's, again, that's not our fault. Pat and I were operating at a certain level, and suddenly this kind of kid turns up.
You guys are like 5 highly talented people. There must have been all sorts of tension and energy that Patrick had to use and leverage for
yeah, well, there wasn't. I mean, there was all sorts of. The personal thing became quite strong. Like Brian and I became really good friends, and I still love that man to this day. And then Kevin and Brian became very good friends, and then Brian and I had a sort of slightly less intense thing, and Tim was just kind of around. Tim was very much a working musician at the time, and he had his own thing going on. So, and again, because Pat was very much at home, but Pat was very much a kind of 9-to-5 working guy. He lived miles away. He had a young family. He had, had all sorts of stuff going on there. And I was just living the dream. I literally lived 200 yards away from La Cielo Drive. So when I watched Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, that's me. That's where I was. That's where I was.
The Manson Street,
yeah. I was right there. And, that's why I love that film so much. And I was just totally living that Englishman in LA dream, And it's, again, appalling behavior, off my nut the whole time. Never in the studio, must say. Never. I was always together in the studio, but always hungover. All of that, I'll just confess that everything I did on that record was written and performed with a hangover.
All those bass lines are yours. You created them in the studio?
Yeah.
Was there? Okay.
Yeah. Well, it was that beautiful thing of, this is why bands make better records than solo artists. It's because it was just that luxury of time. When I do a session, I've got to come up with something on the spot. Mm-hmm. Like a prayer, I had to come up with on the day, like right there. And that's the thing that gets you hired. It's like, well, how quick as can we get him out?
Right.
And whereas I think the reason the Toy Matinee lines are my best is because and it's the same with, perhaps an unlikely album, say, there's another one, it's the Jimmy Nail album, Growing Up in Public, which again is some of my best work because it's just that thing of the luxury of time, just having weeks and weeks to, you play this song over again and you finesse it. And so we're absolutely my life. Although obviously, again, there would have been the Leonard effect. Pat knows how to make me be the best me that I can.
What is it that he gives you? What is it that he?
I don't know.
With?
It's like I don't know. I don't know. But it always happens. I'm always nervous when I turn up to work with him, even though I love him, he's my dear old friend. But I still think, oh God, am I going to let him down? But then I always come out with something, and it's usually because of some input from him. So usually because of something he's suggested. Okay. It's he never tells me what to play, but he just kind of tells me how.
What was the mood of the recording sessions for Toy Matinee?
It was very joyous, very, very joyous and bubbly, and lots of it was lots of fun. There was but I tend to do this with a lot of situations I'm in. I tend to live in a state of Buddha-like ignorance. Where I find out afterwards there's all sorts of, this happens in lots of situations. I'm very unaware of various dynamics. I like to think everyone's getting on, and unless something's really obvious to me, I don't see it. And I didn't realize there was quite a lot of tension between Kevin and Pat on stuff, but that's bound to be. They were the two leading creative lights, and it was very much Pat's baby. We, as far as I was concerned, as far as when all of us were in the studio together working, we were having a blast. We're having, it was just it felt incredibly creative. Like I said, it was quite a long time. My memory of, because, I was party boy at that time. I was out, like I said, I was living the dream in LA, and I was out every night. So I was probably quite foggy for quite a bit of it. There are all sorts of funny little things. Like, the funny thing is, Pat's studio was the first studio I'd ever known where you couldn't smoke. This is back when everyone smoked everywhere. It was in America, people stopped smoking. In Britain, like in Australia, everyone still smoked. And so I had to go outside onto Hollywood Boulevard to smoke. And so they actually had a sign made and stuck on the inside of the front door that said "Guy's office." So you opened the front door to the world, and that was my office. So and because I smoked a lot, and of course, being an Englishman, we any chance to be in the sun, we would take. So I was out there smoking a lot, and a lot of it was just to feel the sun on my face. So I did an awful lot of discussion and chat and stuff just happened on the pavement outside the studio. Well, no, Tim was the only person Tim was very much there to work and do his parts. He's a lovely guy too, but I don't know if he had stuff going on at home or whatever, but there was Brian and Kevin and I had very much also, because Pat had a young family. Brian and Kevin and I had very much a kind of family dynamic. We used to hang out, drink a lot together and stuff. And I loved it because of course I knew this. The LA I knew was kind of quite glitzy and uptown, and they knew this much more kind of cool muso sort of post-punk LA. So it was really nice to all these very dodgy late night dives and stuff. So it was, I loved immersing myself in their world.
It seems that Toy Matinee is this intersection of still had big budgets then, hugely talented crew coming together, fantastic production, and it sounds like there was time to let the ideas evolve. And
that was the thing.
Thing.
Yes, so that was absolutely the thing. It was the time for record. Time really is the ultimate luxury, which I think is why bands tend to make the best work, because it's if you're just getting people into play, you can't have them around for weeks and weeks and weeks just working on stuff. I think that's why but I mean, Peter Gabriel always worked like that. Of course, the thing is, I mean, it's very expensive at the best of times, but if you're not an actual band and everyone's on the clock, then I guess certainly now it would just be impossible. I mean, we were all getting paid. It was a band thing, but everyone was getting paid, so everyone had that. And for me, it was kind of, this was nice. I've got enough money to just hang out and do this and relax and have a nice time. Whereas I think for Brian and Kevin, it was probably more money than they'd ever seen.
Was the thought to bring the band on the road at that point?
So I can't. This is where things get a bit fuzzy for me. I can't really remember what happened at the end, because things obviously were, because I had to leave, right? That's why I'm not on the last song. I stayed right up to the last minute, and then I had to rush home, where I literally just had time for one day's rehearsal with Pink Floyd before we went back out on the road. So I was there absolutely as long as I could be. And then then I kind of forgot about it. I had so much other stuff going on, and then when I came back to LA straight after the Floyd tour to do the Robbie Robertson album, and I went and did I did some sessions for Pat that time. In fact, that's when I did I did I'm Breathless, the Madonna album, and it all seems to, and I can't for some reason I can't really, everything seems to have gone cold and gone a bit weird. I think Kevin and Brian had a falling out. No, sorry, Kevin and Pat. There'd been some sort of falling out. I remember then later when I was back in England being asked to be in the Last Plane Out video, and it came from some manager who I didn't know, and Pat clearly wasn't involved, and I was going to have to buy my own plane ticket to go and be in this video, and I was like, this doesn't seem right somehow. And then then the album came out. When the album came out, I think I was down in Louisiana working on this abortive band project with John Caron, and I remember the whole thing sort of fizzled out, and it wasn't until, and then there started to be a little bit of a buzz about the album for a while, and then I remember the one thing was the next thing I heard was I got a request through my publishers for Last Plane Out to be used in Beverly Hills 90210.
Oh, okay.
I'm thinking, that's nice. And then it just sort of went quiet, really. I mean, I loved it. And I got there. I can't remember I think I actually had to go out and buy the album.
Oh, okay.
And I think the whole thing had just sort of fizzled. And I didn't realize there was this whole other thing going on with Kevin where he put a band together and went out on the road with it. And I don't remember even being approached for any of that stuff.
Yeah. He's the one that actually played bass on the tour, I think.
No, Spencer Campbell, I think, played bass on the tour.
Yeah? Okay.
Yeah, I think. And Sheryl Crow was in the band, of course, by then.
That's right. Yeah. With and Mark Bonilla as well. They did a string of shows on the West Coast, but you didn't get to see any of those, no.
No. I didn't know anything about it at the time. Didn't know what was going on.
So the idea evolved to Third Matinee, which was Toy Matinee, but instead of Kevin, Richard Page. How were you approached for that?
Pat just, said he was asked me to come out, and he said he was doing this sort of follow-up thing to Toy Matinee. And I mean, he didn't sound as excited this time round, to be honest. But it was very different thing. It was very much Pat's baby, and it was, Pat with a list of kind of superstar session players. I mean, it's the only time I've ever played on a record with Vinnie Colaiuta, for instance. And I mean, it's brilliant. I actually listened to it the other day. It is a really, really good album. It's a very different. But that was I came in. I worked on that for like a week or something. It wasn't a band for so much.
Right.
I like Richard Page. I think he was very good. But also, it's quite funny because I was very keen to get out of London. Because I had a gig. I'd always thought, right, a sort of dream gig would be to be in the house band for one of those late night chat shows.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Uh-huh.
I remember talking to Andy Newmark about this. He was saying he got that gig once. He said, "Yeah, it is. It's a dream. It's kind of a dream gig because you just play with legends, and you never have to. It's once a week. You never have to leave home, and it's very cushy."
But wouldn't you get bored after a while? It's that same.
Well, I
routine
did
for a
this
while?
thing, but of course I did a sort of an English version of one of those shows, and I hated it. It was just miserable. I absolutely hated it. So I actually did 2 weeks of it and then flew off to LA to do Pat's thing. And I was meant to have come back after 2 weeks, and I didn't. I ended up actually staying in LA for months and had Gala, my girlfriend, come and join me. But the third matinee was a very, very different thing. But again, brilliant songs, really brilliant songs. But but that was, I think, I kind of, and it was lovely to hang with Pat. It always is. But there was much more. I kind of came in and sort of had to come up with stuff, and that was it done. So yeah, it wasn't the same thing.
Well, it seems like where Toy Matinee was more of a collaborative effort, a lot more contributions from all the different members. Third Matinee seems
I've
more.
I've got writing credits on 3 of those songs.
So. But Third Matinee sounds like it was more of a more Patrick's baby. He was doing more.
Yeah, it was. And I mean, I'm sure Pat would have rather do a band. Pat's he's very much a leader, but he's very happy in a band environment. He likes his boys around him. And girls. I don't mean
we know what you mean there.
Yes.
When did you decide to try your hand at stand-up comedy?
Well, it was. I'd always wanted to do something in comedy. All musicians are funny. I think it's one of the things I love about being a musician is I don't think you get very far as a musician if you're not funny. Just because and a lot of it is just because of the way that you're all forced to live together and have to get on. It's you know what I mean. You got to have some laughs,
like a pack animal.
And also, it's just the stories. I mean, you can't. But it's other than theatre. Other than theatre, there's no other place. Movies don't really have great stories. All the stories involve someone being a dick or a diva. Do you know what I mean? And everyone has to be so well behaved in the film business, which is understandable because you're making these multi-million-dollar things. So there's not that. So the humor in film is different. So whereas theatre and music seem to be the two places where you just get the best stories, the best anecdotes. And I've always loved sitting around telling stories. That's why I'm very happy doing this. I love sitting around telling stories. Just thought, well, why not? The only people who had done shows up to that point, lots of people do one-man show. Ray Davies had done a one-man show, and various other people. And and I saw Ray Davies' show, and it's amazing. But it's amazing as long as you're interested in Ray Davies.
Right.
That's the problem with one-man shows. Where I sort of thought the thing I've got going for me is that you can be if you have any interest in music, there's very few. I've got to be the only person who played for Whitesnake and the Smiths. So I've got something for everyone.
Right. Yeah. You get a lot of background to pull from. Well, I always thought as a rhythm player, timing is so important in comedy, right? Plus you have... Well,
you're absolutely right, yeah.
And you've toured so much, you're trying to kill 22 hours a day somehow. So you're hanging out with people who tend to be eccentric and, get bored and try new interesting things. So, I would imagine that there's a whole lot of material to be able to pull from.
Yeah. But what's quite funny because like musicians have this, I was at some... It was like the 40th anniversary of Quadrophenia, the movie, right? And of course, I live in Brighton, so they had this big thing to market at the Grand Hotel, which of course is featured in the film and in the album. And Zoot Money was playing, and he had all these legendary old sidemen, but most of them didn't know each other. There's like half of them knew each other because musicians tend to come from pools. There's pools of musicians working there, and they spoke. There's this for musicians who have been in the game for quite a long time. They spoke the universal language of Van Morrison stories. because everyone has played for Van Morrison at some point, and everyone has a Van Morrison story. So it's literally like Van Morrison is an actual currency amongst musicians. He's the equivalent of tobacco in prison, you know.
So what's your Van Morrison connection?
I haven't. I've actually never played for Van. And the funny,
you just disproved your theory.
Although no, but even I've got a story, which is that the time I met him, it was when I was rehearsing for Coverdale Page in LA, and I was staying at the Sunset Marquee, which at that point had the WAG Club or whatever it was called, and it was mental. You had to fight your way through this nightclub to get to your room, and it was amazing. I remember one night going and hang out, and Jimmy was hanging out with Jeff Beck, and you'd have these amazing tables of people, and Van was staying there. He was doing some shows, and heard all these, and you hear all these stories of Van, of how, you know, he's amazing and a genius and can just be so brutal and just cut you to the quick. And I was in the foyer, and he was standing there, and he said, and he knew who I was, right? Which I was amazed. He said, "Oh, you're a guy. Yeah, you play." Well, yeah. And he started talking to me, and I was thinking, wow, this is amazing. And I was just thinking, okay, he's been really nice to me for about 2 minutes. I should probably leave now before he turns, because he will turn. Right. And I tried to get away, and then he carried on talking and said something else nice, and I kept thinking, yeah, okay, I've had like 5 minutes now. He's definitely going to turn. I'm going to have to get away. And so actually, what happened was I had 10 minutes talking to Van Morrison, who was the most charming, friendly, erudite man you can, and I was the rude bastard who kept trying to get away.
So when you're getting ready to do your comedy show, do you do open mics? Do you practice material? Do you rehearse it, or do you pretty much know you're able to? Okay.
Yeah. No. Because it is. I mean, I've done like 5 different shows. I mean, by the time the last one is, I mean, I've got certain greatest hits that I do, but I've kind of had to stop doing it. I mean, I'm not doing it now. Well, obviously, I'm not doing it now, but I had retired it before the lockdown anyway, because, well, for several reasons. I'm just so bored of telling those stories. And also, because I quit drinking, and it's so Pavlovian-y responded with that. I never needed to drink to play music, but I get so nervous in the stand-up. I always had to have a drink before. And then I drink through the show, and I tell all these stories about being this guy with all these drinking stories. And then afterwards, everyone wants to have a drink with the guy who just told all the drinking stories. And it's just, the whole thing is so wrapped up with, and I need to, listen, I'm hardly the first stand-up who's come across this problem, and I will find a way of doing it, and I'm sure it'll be better. But it's just it basically got to, I mean, the long and short is it really wasn't very good to me, because it just involved getting hammered every time I did it.
Okay.
So, but also, I can't tell the Madonna or the Michael Jackson story anymore.
It's too far. Oh, well, you think everyone knows the punchline now?
Yeah, everyone knows the punchlines now, and I've just done it, and I can literally do it completely in my sleep. And you think there's, it's not. It's just,
you're ready to move on.
I'm ready to move on, exactly.
Yeah. Okay.
Although I'm writing another book, and again, this is going to have to be approached differently, because obviously my first book had all the big flashbang stories, but I realized that all the stuff I've been up to over the last 10, 15 years is not necessarily as big and exciting, but in some cases probably funnier, because I've done such odd things. So there you go.
Look, the first book is fantastic. This is a good time for me to plug My Bass and Other Animals, available at any place where fine books are sold or stolen. You can find it at Amazon. I was able to get it down on my Kindle within moments. So it's a very funny book.
Also available as an audio book if you can't be bothered.
Oh, you have an audio version?
There's an audio. Yeah, it was read by me, although I had a terrible cold when I did it, so it sounds like it's read by Melvin Bragg.
I did not even know there was an audio version. I'll check that out. Are you surprised when David or Nick make it known that they want to go back out on the road?
Well, the Nick thing has been, the Nick thing is fascinating. We should be on the fucking road now. I mean, that's, and Nick loves it, but then Nick hasn't done it for years. Like I said, the whole thing with the Source for Secrets, is that when Lee came up with the idea, I said, that's an absolutely brilliant idea, and if you write it up properly, I'll get it to Nick. But there's no way he'll go for it. And I just couldn't see how he would. And amazingly, he did. And it was, it was the best idea he'd ever had. I think Nick would have been very happy to get out on the road years ago, but he wasn't asked.
Okay. A lot of those drums were written when he was quite a young man. Now he's out there playing it, but he's keeping up with it. Did it take him long to get back?
It's amazing. No, it didn't. It really didn't. And you know what's funny? It was he was right on it in a way that he hasn't been when I've worked with him with Floyd. And I think that's two reasons. I think he might be slightly nervous of the magnitude of it. And also, this is the first time I've ever played with Nick on his own. He always had a net, I mean, he always had Gary Watt. And I know, I know how I'd play if there was another bass player. It's just, there's no real consequence. It doesn't really matter. You can just sort of cruise. And no, because he plays like a demon. I mean, it scares me sometimes when we're doing astronomy and stuff like that. I actually get quite scared, but just, whoa, calm down, Nick. But no, because he's playing better now than I've ever known him. Mm-hmm. It's fantastic. It's like you totally get it now. I totally get it. The Nick Mason thing. I mean, he's got such a brilliant, unique, And also, what's interesting is now, and it's almost like a generational thing where I'm amazed. We've had all these music. Like one night when we were last on tour in Europe, and King Crimson came to see us, and people like Jeremy Stacey, and they're fucking in awe of Nick. Mm-hmm. And that's never really been around before, But this is an interesting thing. This goes back to Toy Matinee. I mean, when I first came across Brian, I mean, in the 80s, you basically had two types of drummers. You had your kind of indie, punky, basically a bit shit drummers, and everyone else just wanted to be Jeff Beccaro or Simon Phillips. Mm-hmm. And was super muso and super tight and everything. And Brian, and no one wanted to be Ringo. Do you know what I mean? No one wanted to play like Ringo. Ringo was just not mentioned as a force. And Brian was the first person I ever came across who had all the chops in the world, but knew exactly when to be Ringo. And or Nick, or play like Nick. He had that same sort of thing. And, so I think that's why Brian has actually been so successful. He kind of was at the vanguard of a new generation of drummers who kind of took, everything that had come before and sort of distilled it into this lovely mess. And I think in the same way that Ringo was sort of reappraised, I think that's kind of now happening with Nick, and that Nick's been very much reappraised as a drummer. People actually looking at what he did actually do, which is, it's fantastic. He's actually incredibly musical as a drummer.
The material that's being played on that tour is material that I think in many ways was overshadowed by Floyd's later career. Like, to me, I came into Floyd later, and then it took me a while to go back and rediscover. It's like a whole nother great band. It's
a pop group, and it's a pop group, and it's fun, it's all the darkness. What I found interesting though was when because you're right. There's a lot of that stuff I've never, that I know it is that thing of being a musician. It was just part of your homework. It was part of the curriculum, But it was interesting actually having to go really into it. So, and you suddenly realise that. Because I always see I see Wall Floyd is completely different to Dark Side Floyd, and then the sort of Metal Floyd is the start of Imperial period Floyd, and then before that is sort of
that's the demarcation line.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, Metal is the demarcation line, but then you realise it actually isn't. I mean, when you play Atom Heart Mother or If something like that, and you realise that there's so much of even the Wall is already there. It's already there. That's why I can't tell you how much fun this band is, because it is literally that thing of it's Pink Floyd before it was so important and before it was so serious. And it's just revealing this pop group behind the vast faceless obelisk. Mm-hmm. And the whole fact that we chat with the audience, we joke with the audience, everyone's and it's you can mess about with the songs, and you know, these songs and they all present ways to mess about them, and you know, we have loads of little gags. It's very fun. I mean, there's tons of musical in jokes that we put in because Lee, Gary, and I are all Who nuts, and it's kind of, I've almost lost count of the amount of Who gags that have gone into the set.
Now, the On an Island tour, that was the last to feature Richard Wright. Was he struggling at the time through the performances, or was his health not a concern?
No, he was on fire. No, not at all. Mm-hmm. No, what was so beautiful about that was the fact that that absolutely, I don't think people, what's nice is it made the world aware of just how, because the debate, you know, with Floyd, David, Roger. Mm-hmm. People didn't seem to realize that. So that actually the musical axis of the band was David and Rick together. You know, there was something about those two men who, and they were both very, very similar in that they're both terrible communicators verbally, and yet can speak to the world, you know, in such a profound and intimate way through their instruments, and they could speak to each other, you know, in that way, and just the genuine, the love and affection, you know, those two had for each other. That was fantastic. The other thing that was, you know, obviously, and he was my father-in-law at the time, so it was incredibly, you know, very special for me. And the fact that he was in the band, right? The fact that he was a sideman, so which meant that for the first time in his life, he got introduced every night. And, you know, that used to have me in tears practically every night, because they say, on the keyboards, Mr. Richard Wright, and David would sort of pretend to forget to introduce him some nights. And just the love that would pour out of the audience, you know, it was so moving. And I just think that was just, there couldn't have been a better thing for Rick to end on, you know. It was such much more better than a Pink Floyd tour, because he got this affirmation and this, you know, confirmation and love and respect that was, you know, I think he maybe hadn't really had before.
That final performance of David and Richard doing Echoes, people can find it on YouTube. Very emotional, very touching.
It's incredibly touching.
Yeah. Was it known that was the last time they were going to play that song?
No, not at all. No, Rick was fine. No, we didn't know Rick was ill for another 2 years. I mean, he wasn't ill. You know, he was fine at the time.
Do you know if there's much more Floyd material out there that will ever see the light of day?
No, I don't think so. I really don't. No, they. I mean, no, they've not after the later years and that. I mean, because basically, and you know, Endless River was basically every last scrap that was left from the Division Bell sessions. So there might be some tapes moldering somewhere. I don't know. It would have to be stuff from back 71 or whatever, because you know, from after Wish You Were Here, it was basically Roger and David were just writing on their own, you know. I mean, Comfortably Numb was something that David wrote for his solo album.
Did you know ahead of time that Dave was going to be joining Roger for that version of Comfortably Numb at the O2 Arena?
Of course I did. Why do you think I was there?
You were there? Okay.
You
drove him there.
We were begging him to play somewhere else because it was so obvious he was going to do the O2. No, I was also involved in the reason that he did it, which was the interesting thing is that they were both. There's this charity for Palestinian children called Hoping for Palestine, which I've been involved with for years, and they put on this big charity dinner every year, and I've been in the house band many times, and we have fantastic performers come and do it. And Bella Freud, who's asked David and Roger if they do it, and they both said yes, and it was like, what? And it was just like, yeah, it's Palestine kids, yeah, of course, do anything, and it's like, what? It's like, that's all we had to ask them. And so it was going to be this big private charity bash, and then there was talk of maybe we should get Nick and make it Pink Floyd, and David made the very good point of said absolutely not. If there's going to be a Pink Floyd reunion, it can't be at some toff charity thing because it's just a terrible look. But I think David said yes, and he one of his conditions was that Roger and he would do a duet of "To Know Him Is to Love Him," which is very, very funny on paper. But apparently Pink Floyd used to do that as a sound check number. So it wasn't completely out there. They did actually used to do it. But it's one of those things, it was a good idea on paper. But then when we came to the show and it wasn't really working out and they had to change the parts because the key was wrong and everything. And it just wasn't quite so, it wasn't, I can't remember if we actually did it. I don't think maybe we did. But I think it was then the last condition. So then David said, all right, if you won't do it, Roger, if you won't do that, then I'll come and play Company Numb one night on your tour. And then Roger made what I think was a complete mistake in announcing it. He said, so one night David's going to come play Company Numb. So, what's his name? Kilminster. Every night from then on the Wall tour, he gets revealed at the top of the wall for the big solo of Company Numb. The audience go, oh. Which is a terrible thing to do. And David was playing Europe, and so I said to him, because we were all very tight at the moment, so I was still with Gala, and I said, let's make a weekend of it. Why not just go and play somewhere you wouldn't expect? Go to Brussels and, find some fabulous restaurant and, go to museums, whatever. And David just couldn't be bothered. I was begging him, just do anywhere other than the O2. It'd just be so nice if it wasn't the London audience that got it for once. And it was quite funny. So obviously I was there and there was a few of David's other close friends were in the audience. And so sort of fans who really know about David and his life, people were going, wait a minute. Yeah. hang on a minute. So, but it was incredible. When David appeared at the top of the wall, it was, in fact, he fluffed the beginning of the solo because he was literally knocked back by the cheer that came from the audience. Right. It was extraordinary. I've never heard anything like it. It was amazing.
Oh,
it was incredibly emotional moment.
Just watching the video, I think it's one of the few times that I've wept at something like that, because it's like, okay, it's all okay. The guys are back together. It was a moment that needed to happen, and it finally happened. Oh.
Yeah.
So these days you're spending time doing your Lockdown Licks series. I want to recommend people check
my
out
Lockdown Licks. Just go to my channel, Guy Pratt, and yes, you'll find them. I'm doing one today, actually. I'm doing a Kirsty MacColl special. And I'm writing my book, and hopefully at some point we'll be back out on tour. We've rescheduled our UK and European tour for with the Source for the Secrets. We're meant to be going out next spring, and I hope that we can.
So you have some dates already locked in for next year?
Yeah,
being
that's
hopeful about that.
It's already. Yeah, we've rescheduled for the third time. We're going to keep rescheduling until we can get out there.
Okay. All right. Any plans for Australia, other parts of the world?
We were going to be coming out there, but it didn't quite come off. But we very much want to play Australia. I very much want. Obviously, I want to play Australia. It's incredibly dear to my heart. Yeah, let's hope so.
Excellent. All right. Well, again, thank you so much, Guy, for spending time with us here on the show. I want to remind folks, go to guypratt.com, Google him, go on YouTube, find Lockdown Licks, especially if you're a horrible bass player like me and you want to figure out some of the material that he's done in his life. Now, do you have to go back and remember them all? Do you have to relearn things you haven't played for 20 years?
Kidding? Are you kidding? Yeah, it's a night. I mean, some of them on Like a Prayer, there was still a couple of licks I couldn't get right, but it just got to the point where I couldn't be fucked. I spent hours. What's interesting is how with a lot of it, it's just like, I mean, the Toy Matinee stuff, which it's been interesting to find out. It's a lot of it's not as difficult as it sounds. And I was thinking Queen of Misery. I was thinking, oh Jesus, this is going to take me days. And it was just there. But it was like pick the bass. It was like, oh, I remember this guy. I know this guy. The funniest thing is the really early, the Ice House stuff, where it's like, I wasn't that guy yet. I'm still becoming a guy. So that's really charming. That's literally like playing this kid stuff and going, oh, any night. Oh, look at him. Oh, bless.
Well, look, Guy, again, thank you so much. And when you get that book finished and you got something to talk about, let me know. We'd love to have you back on the show.
Absolutely. Be very happy to, Nate. Cheers.
That was absolutely delightful. Thank you so much, Guy, for coming on the show. Again, there's an extended interview up on our Patreon page, patreon.com/Vinyl Guide. Go up there now. You could be listening within moments, and it helps support this show. Also, check out Guy Pratt's Lockdown Lick series. Give Guy Pratt a Google. Find him on YouTube, subscribe to his channel, and you can watch his Lockdown Lick series. Again, it's a series of videos he comes out with maybe once or twice a week. He walks us through some of his more famous bass lines, gives some behind-the-scenes stories of the recordings that he's been involved in. That's the Guy Pratt Lockdown Lick series on YouTube. And also you can get his book, Guy Pratt, My Bass and Other Animals. There's a Kindle version, there's an audio version, which must be extremely entertaining, and it's all available at guypratt.com. And everyone, that is it for this week's episode of The Vinyl Guide. Share this episode. Put it on your social media, put it on your Facebook, tweet it out on Twitter, put it on Instagram. That's a huge help to us. And if you have a few moments, please give us a positive review on whatever podcast platform you listen to this on, be it Apple Podcasts or Stitcher or Spotify. Log in, give us 5 out of 5 or 10 out of 10 stars, whatever. Give us a nice review, make us blush, say something nice, and that is hugely appreciated. We'll be back shortly with a brand new episode. So until we talk next time, keep spinning. Cheers.
That's it for this episode of The Vinyl Guide. Send your thoughts to Nate at thevinylguide.com or follow or tag us on Instagram at Vinyl Guide. Until next time, keep spinning.